Hi, and welcome to another edition of USAJobZoo.com TV. I'm AJ Janitschek, along with CEO of USAJobZoo.com, Bill Golden, and today's sponsor is IntelligenceCareers.com. Go to their website and you'll find jobs not just for cleared people, but for people that are looking for a job in most any career, clearance or not. And today's featured employer is Lockheed Martin. Also go to USAJobZoo.com and you'll click on the banner for Lockheed Martin and you can find jobs that they're hiring for right now. Correct, Bill?
That's correct. Look for the Lockheed Martin banner at the top of USAJobZoo.com. On any of the web pages, click to it and you'll find out what Lockheed Martin has going.
Now today's subject is going to be how somebody who doesn't have a job, or even somebody with a job, can create their own work. In essence, if you're looking for work and nobody is calling you, nobody is hiring you, you can start by creating your own job or getting into a career by making it happen.
And that's important. For the future, we're going to talk about the economy later, kind of a long-term outlook. But for the future, many people really need to begin thinking about creating their own future, their own reality. Whether it's working for themselves or working with their neighbors and within their local community, the American economy is changing and will change, and people who do not change with it are in trouble.
Do you mean just submitting my resume to USAJobZoo.com and going to your career fairs is not enough?
No, it's not enough. We have USA JobZoo has lots of great jobs for people around the world and across the USA, and you will find community jobs as well as many other kinds of jobs. But I want to stress community jobs because at the end of the day, we may have, and we have between 70 to 90,000 jobs online at USAJobZoo.com. But we have many more people that need jobs, and the economy is changing.
Mm-hmm. If I want to try to create my own job, how do I begin? Go ahead.
Is to ask the question, what skills do I have?
Good point, because if you're not interested in first of all, what you want to do, then you've got to have some passion there too. But if you don't know what you're doing, if it comes to nuclear technician or brain surgery, then you've wasted your time.
Sure, but let's forget about nuclear technicians and brain surgeons.
That's the extremes.
Let's talk about people in their own community. One of the challenges people have is that when you ask them, tell me what it is you do, they will say something perhaps like, I handle time cards for my company. I do inventory control for my company. They have such a specialized task that they do in their organization that outside of that task, they're not necessarily employable.
Mm-hmm. The unfortunate thing can be sometimes too in a company, they have it so rigidly defined that you may be in a very unique position that nobody will ever hire you because I have no need for that, or a hiring recruiter or a hiring company will never have a need for that.
Absolutely, and we need, if there's one point that I want people to walk away with today, is I want them to understand, if your job can be automated, it will be. If your job can be done elsewhere because your job involves information, it will be. If your job can be shared with other people, it will be. And last, and perhaps most important, if your company does not need, and most companies do not need people working 8 hours a day. If you have a job that companies only need perhaps doing 2 to 3 days per week or 4 to 5 hours in a given time, your job will go away or your job will change.
Well, what's scary is what you're saying is that people are thinking, I need a job now and I need to get working right away. And unfortunately, that's such a short-term view that the job that they may be trying to get today, as you have already said, could be gone within a short amount of time, not just maybe this week, but maybe by the beginning of the year or the next year or 5 years down the road.
Part of our economic challenge that we have right now is people are too locked into the way we've been working for the last 20 to 30 years. Now, let me say this for anyone who's listening. My heart breaks for all the people who have been caught up by things moving faster than they have been able to adapt. I believe it's completely wrong that there are literally not millions of individuals, but millions of American families that have lost their homes over the last 3 years. Here's a reality check on that. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. The world has changed, and the prediction is in the upcoming year, by the end of 2012, at least 2 million more American families will be homeless just from foreclosures due to a change in economy. So what I want people to focus on is they need to create their own reality, and they need to really, really think about this from the viewpoint of what skills do I have? Not be specialized, but what skills? What can you sell to your neighbors, or what do you need in your community?
Wouldn't a good place to start be to just sit and make a list?
It would.
Are there any other ways to do that? Talk to family and friends and say, Bill, let's enjoy a drink together and let's watch the football game, but let's also talk about my skills, and maybe you can give me some feedback. And that way you can share with somebody else, and by the end of the game you might have a usable list of some things that would key you to say, I do have skills. Just because I processed punch cards all day long, well, there had to be some organizing to it. There had to be some carrying, lifting, movement, communications. All of a sudden, when you start putting it in those realms, a lot of different things open up to you besides just processing cards.
Sure, and that's very important. So what you just described is what we call brainstorming 101. I get around the kitchen table, find a friend who will be truthful with you. Find a couple of friends. Get a piece of paper, get a pad of paper, and begin to write down what are skills. But you need to take it to the next step. I would tell you that many people can't even answer that question as to what they do themselves. They may say, well, I'm an auto mechanic, but I tend to handle just the testing.
I think many people run into these problems of self-identification just when they're trying to do their resume for the first time. I think we're brought up kind of learning and being taught that, you're supposed to be humble and not so big on yourself and brag on yourself. So when you have to actually sit down on a resume or a PC and start typing up a resume, it's like, oh man, how do I identify what I think I'm good at? And I think a good start might be to just ask your friends and say, look, don't BS me. Tell me honestly, what do you think are skills that are viable for an employer?
Sure, and then take it to the next step. Ask people. Put yourself into a worst case scenario and say, AJ, tell me truthfully, if I were to lose my job today, based upon what you know about me and what skills I have, who do you think would hire me, and who do you think would hire me for what?
Yeah, and why would they hire me?
And why would they hire you? Because why is going to be incredibly important in the economy of the future.
Yep. And that's the tough part for somebody to do a self-identification on, because it's, am I really good at delivering things, or am I really good about moving these cards around that we talked about? Don't know. You think in your own self, well, I think so, I'm perfect. But if you were to actually ask their supervisor or coworkers, you may find a totally different story.
If you were to ask their neighbor, you might get a different story. Now, it's not that their neighbor thinks that they're not capable of doing something, but here's a problem. If you were to lose your job today, and the focus is on a positive outcome, you need to think about creating your own reality, your own job in the future. Mm-hmm. If your neighbor looks at you and says, I really don't know what you're capable of doing. I kind of know from what you've said that you do this, but if people in your own community, whether it's your church group, your sports club, wherever you go, if they don't know what you do, then you're starting from behind, because people are willing to take a chance on people they know and trust. Mm-hmm. But if they don't really know you, and that's a major problem we have in the modern world, People are disconnected even from their own community. They're used to working a 40-hour week for a company that defines a reality, and that is a broken reality.
True. Things are changing. And before we move on to this next piece, I'm going to say the biggest resistance to things is change. Or change. That's the biggest thing that people resist to. Earlier this year, a guy named Steve Terrell Smith wrote an article that was on the internet. It says, "Stop job hunting and create your own job." And in this article, he gives 5 ways in order to get on the path for creating your own job. And the first one is actually to start an entrepreneurial group amongst friends. Much like what we described, where you could be watching football and you could be starting to talk about what business would it be good for us to get into? What do you think about selling ice cream? Well, I don't know. I really like coffee. Let's think about doing that somehow. So you sit around the table and you share ideas. Remember you talked about brainstorming a moment ago. That's the beginning of it right there. Phase 1.
You're absolutely on the money, AJ.
The next thing he points out is pick something that you're passionate about. I happen to be passionate about stamp collecting.
I've heard that from your wife.
And
Many
honestly,
times.
I can't tell you how many times I've thought about doing that as a business. The danger, though, is actually taking something you're passionate about, and if it becomes just a job, I'm afraid that I would lose something that is a joy in my life.
Sure, but you have got to focus. If it is a joy in your life, you've got to ask economics 101, can I make money at this?
Yeah.
But you've got to go down that road. You've got to begin thinking about that.
So you being passionate about soccer, what would you do?
If number one, I'm a licensed soccer coach, and over the years I have pursued becoming a better licensed soccer coach. I'm active in a soccer club. I'm active in the local community. I let people know all about soccer all the time, and whether it's as a coach, as a referee, or just being supportive. In fact, I will say, I'm very happy to say, I'm also a tournament director, coordinator for one of the largest soccer clubs in Northern Virginia. I volunteer, and that's real important. Many times you need to, that bond with your neighbor or in your community, you need to volunteer where there's no money actually coming in, and you can do great and wonderful things.
And let's not forget that point, because I'm going to readdress that volunteering in just a moment. In Tim's article, the third item he brought up was joining a local meetup group or attend an entrepreneurial conference in your area, where you can meet and greet other entrepreneurs, or in your meetup group, again, other people that are positively focused and working on trying to create careers for themselves, so that everybody can kind of feed off of each other, almost like even its own entrepreneurial group, too.
Sure. And perhaps we can talk about that more when we come back in our next session.
Yeah.
Belonging to a group is very important. There are many churches that have groups. There are your local Chamber of Commerce. I know many people think the Chambers of Commerce are for businesses, but an individual can often join a chamber where the entire membership is $50 to $75 per year for an individual. You can participate in committees on whether public policy, anything imaginable, because you're a member, even though you are just you.
And that would be a great opportunity for networking.
It would.
The fourth item that Tim wrote in his article was to start a group of your own to attract other entrepreneurs. So you could, in essence, go to a Chamber of Commerce meeting and say, I'm forming this group. So as a member, if you're interested, come see me.
And why don't we begin our next session with that in mind?
Before we go, can we do one more point?
Sure.
Because the fifth point that he brought up was basically to target a startup company for a contract or part-time work. And earlier you mentioned volunteering, and that's also a good way to get your foot in the door, is to volunteer, work for free, get your foot in the door, and if things work out, who knows, you may have just found your next job.
And in our next session, I'm going to push you back to point number 4, and then we're going to cover number 5.
And that brings us to the end of another edition of USAJobZoo.com TV. I'm AJ Janitschek.
And I'm Bill Golden.
And we'll be back next week. We'd like to thank our technicians, Kevin, Tim, and Kenny. Without them, we wouldn't have any lights, we wouldn't have any camera, and we wouldn't look this good. Bye-bye.